Welcome to the Curious Builder Podcast. I'm Mark Williams, your host. I am here with Mark Scherer, owner of Scherer Brothers Lumberyard. Welcome, Mark. Thanks for coming on.
Not the owner.
Okay, not the owner. His name is in the title of Scherer Brothers Lumber. So why don't you tell me what you are then?
We're
a family of Scheers.
There are a family of Scheers. We are a third generation family-run business. Started in 1930 by my grandfather and my great uncle. Presently, my two brothers, myself, my cousin, run the business, but we have a number of family members who still have an active interest in it. So I always want to be very clear with that because it can be distorted and or occasionally I might upset somebody.
Understood.
With the wrong perception out there. So.
It's funny because, I can relate to this from the standpoint that when you have a relationship with somebody like I've had with you, I've known you for quite a while now, and obviously my dad built homes and he knew your dad who's passed away, and obviously the rest of your brothers as well. But when you identify and like you're my point of contact, like for me personally, I speak mostly with you. And it's kind of funny how that person represents the company. Actually, it can even be in a salesperson. I was having someone on the podcast recently and I was like, are you the owner of the company? He goes, no. I'm like, I've worked with you for almost 2 decades. I thought you were the owner of the company. It's just funny how when you have such a deep relationship sometimes with a specific person, how they do represent the brand of the company. I think it's good for us to remember as owners of companies that our salespeople, too many people, are the owner in the sense that they represent us to the client.
The whole notion of ownership transcends just the leadership, the actual ownership of the organization, and even salespeople. I want everybody in my company to feel like they're an owner. And in fact, we do have a small portion of our organization as ESOP, so the employees do have a chip in the game, as it were. But hey, there's some smaller builders that, the truck drivers are the company to them. That what the truck drivers do, how they represent us, how they fly the flag, as it were. That's Scherer Brothers, and they don't know me. And quite possibly bumped into them, or they've come to continuing ed classes or something like that. But yeah, no, it's really from a team dynamic, from a corporate values kind of communal sense. That ownership component is just a huge thing to keep working on, and you can't mandate it. You can't say you will act like an owner. It just doesn't work that way. You have to legitimately just be so engaged with your teams at all various levels that just becomes part of who you are as a company.
Would you say, colloquially people often refer to it as company culture, right? I think that's what you're speaking to. Like if someone's going to act and represent Scherer Brothers or Mark T. Williams Custom Homes in a certain way, it's not like you can't just give them a mandate and say, act like this. You can coach them up, but ultimately if they believe it, and that's why I've always said in sales, if you believe what you're selling, obviously it goes, maybe some people can sell what they don't believe in. I can't, but if I believe in it, man, I can sell it.
Yeah, I culture used to be that particular term, especially when I was young. For me, it was like nails on a chalkboard. You'd hear the word culture and you go, "Well, what's that?" That's you cannot affect exact culture. That was kind of my naive approach to the world when I was in my 20s. And really, what I've come to believe is that culture is really just it's a repetition of historical actions. And it needs to be consistent. The weakest link in the chain, as it were. The same thing applies to culture. Because within your culture, you can say, hey, we are a moral, integrity-based organization. But if the leadership is cheating on their wife, or if they are, taking funds out of the company and doing things, employees see that. And so it's do as I say, not as I do, which any of us that have children know that doesn't work. So it truly is a reflection, I believe, of the values as practiced, not stated, of the owners, the leaders of an organization. And, it takes time. And you have to be very conscientious about it.
That reminds me of something I heard once in church, actually, and it was, I'd rather see a sermon than hear one any day. I think that's just what you said. Basically, don't be a hypocrite. Live what you say you want. I've never really thought about it that much in terms of a corporate setting, but I think you're right. Interesting. You have how many people do you guys employ?
A little over 300.
300.
Yeah.
Oh man, I was guessing before. I was talking to someone before the way over, and I was explaining you were coming on. I was like, I don't know, maybe 70 to 100 people. 300. My goodness.
No, it's we've got a fair amount of things going on. We were joking about. I went to St. John's University in Minnesota. And, one of the things I'd heard, I believe it's St. Francis that actually said it, but he said, preach often, and when necessary, speak.
Oh, that's a good one. I like that.
So and that goes back to actions versus words.
Mm-hmm.
And even when you look at so many companies out there and they have their mission, vision, value statements.
Yeah.
And one of the biggest tricks for any organization is to really identify who you are.
That's so funny you say that.
Not who you want to be. Because the second that your mission or your values are aspirational, your employees check out on you. They're going to say, well, what do you mean? We're not, that's not who we are.
Right.
And so when it comes down to running a business, and a sizable chunk of what I do is continuing to further just those values, that culture element within the organization. And not only within our employees, but certainly taking it out to our customers. Mm-hmm. I don't consider myself a preacher by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm certainly an ambassador.
Right. It's interesting you say that. We're in the middle of a rebrand. We're almost completely done, and I've been very impressed with how their writing skills, as they write, they've helped us develop our mission statement. But it's interesting because really how it started, and I'm a small company, right? We're 5-6 people. I mean, my name. You were very helpful. About 6 months ago, I called you, and I was debating whether I should rename my company, thinking that 20 years from now, selling Mark T. Williams Custom Homes is a little bit harder entity than Aspen Homes or a mountain range that I like, just because I like that. And you were very helpful. Just saying, hey, you're a third generation. People know your name. Like, you reflect, you are the company. And like, for better or for worse, don't like own that. Like, it's okay. And that was really helpful at that time to hear that. And as we've done in this rebranding deal, as we use Sen & Sons, they're a very talented firm, but all the characteristics when they write it, I can see, it's almost like reading a horoscope, which I don't believe in, but like you read it and you see like, oh yeah, I like that line, I like that line. But you're right. I didn't write the mission statement myself because it's hard sometimes to describe yourself. Mm-hmm. It's a lot easier to like interview with somebody and let them be, basically write it for you and say, this is your personality. This is what we've experienced in talking with you. And this is what seems to line up. And then you read it and you're like, wow, that does describe me. And so I just thought that was helpful. I don't know if you've ever tried to write a mission statement yourself. And certainly it's not easy. I mean, it's actually, to your point, I think you nailed it on the head, saying like, if it's too aspirational, it becomes this thing that you want it to be, but it's not what it is. And and
it's got to be simple, and it's got to be memorable and easily stated. So ours has been for, 20, 25 years, is working together, filling needs.
I like that.
Simple. You can put a tagline on your email sign-off. Employees get it. It's broad, like a horoscope, but I think genuinely reflects kind of the approach we want to take with all of our teams. Mm-hmm. Hey, we're in this together. Everybody's got different needs in the process, and we're going to do whatever we can to make sure that we are enhancing and or adding value to what our customers are doing, mm-hmm. or our coworkers. Mm-hmm. And that gets lost too. A lot of times your customer is not somebody outside the company. It's somebody internally. And recognizing that, not taking it for granted. It's a little bit like fighting with your siblings. Yeah. It's going to happen every once in a while, but hopefully you're still celebrating the holidays together.
Right. Well, and you respect each other. Actually, before we go on to some of our next topics, it's interesting. So, and I know this story, but I'd love to hear, I think the audience and people would be interested in this. I've told this story 20, 30 times because I think it's so valuable. It was told to me just high level, and I'd love for you to speak at it a little bit more at length, but just the wisdom and who created it within Scherer Brothers of how you can actually work for the company and what some of the criteria was, meaning you had to, I think it was 5 years you had to work outside the company, and walk
Correct.
us through that, because I think I've told that to some other companies. I have a cousin who's down in Kansas City. He has a company of about 50 people, and I've asked him, hey, when your kids get older, and so we talked about this, and he's like, everyone I've told this story to is like, mm-hmm. hats off to them. That was a great idea. So,
and I don't know if I can attribute it to any one individual. Mm-hmm. Certainly, it was always communicated to me by my father, mm-hmm. but I know that between he and his brother and their two first cousins in the second generation, they wanted to ensure that the business was neither here to serve the family, nor was the family here to serve the business. They're two separate entities, so we don't really talk shop at family functions. Keep it separate because not everybody's involved. Mm-hmm. But perhaps even more importantly, we wanted to have qualified individuals working for the business, adding value, and to further the business. And I guess we've never put a cap on how many family members we can have, but the whole notion of, hey, go get an education, go get a job. It drives the kids, and this applied to me too. It drives us to be good at something, mm-hmm. to be inspired by some subject matter. Now, for me personally, I was a political science and philosophy major, which lends itself great to the lumber business.
I was a speech comm major, so
There you go. Well, that's when you can't do speech. Yeah. I'm teasing.
That's true.
But so for us, and everybody's got a different journey, a different story. And then I went and worked for West Publishing Company, which is now Thomson Reuters.
I didn't know that.
Before I went to law school at William Mitchell College of Law, and I did that while I started out fledgling in the business. I had a brother who's a CPA, another brother who was a finance major. Both of them worked Chris worked for Arthur Andersen back in the day, and then for TCF. Pete worked for a couple banks and was heavy into commercial land development deals and got to know some of our customers that way. But so it's kind of on the periphery of the industry, but not necessarily doing what we're doing. But, you get promoted, you get recognized. You have skills. You learn from other people because it's not like we have the greatest ideas in the world. Lumber industry is not necessarily cutting edge. I hate to tell anybody this, not super fashionable.
The one thing I would say about that, though, if you look at, social media has become such a massive platform. Mm-hmm. Even this podcast would not exist without social media. I followed someone, I went to their conference, they had me on their podcast, and I'm like, this is amazing. I want to do this. And so, certainly podcasts essentially is like old style radio broadcasting, which has been around forever, right? Finding out about these industries, people are so interested. So I think about wood, right? I mean, you see something on Pinterest or Instagram or all these photos of amazing wood products. I think people probably today know more about the different cuts of wood than you did 30 years ago. And I say that only because now you'll have someone who, will graphically see like, hey, that's rift cut Coruscant, rift cut white oak or Coruscant white oak. And I'm sort of amazed, especially from an artist standpoint, how did they know that? I know that because I'm, designing cabinets and I'm working through this detail, but I'm sort of impressed that, some of our clients, not all of them, are more educated because of this. They're also sometimes more dangerous because they.
I was just saying, it's a good and a bad thing both. I mean, I go back to this. Lumber business used to be pretty simple. It was, you'd send out 2x4s for your interior walls, 2x6 for the exterior walls. You were using 2x10s for your floor joists. You're doing all that stuff, and your decking. I love to use decking. You had three choices. Do you want a cedar deck? Do you want a redwood deck? Or are you going to do a pressure treated deck? Now, well, first of all, redwood's completely off the table. And if you've seen the price of cedar lately, and that's not going to get much better. Very expensive, but you have all sorts of exotic woods, mm-hmm. and then you've got all the composites. Do you want compressed fiberboard? Do you want plastic, vinyl? Yep. Different products that are out there, and they all serve different purposes. I think we always have to be careful, though, because a lot of people get caught up in the notion that it's maintenance free. And
I know.
Nothing within a home is ever maintenance free.
Nothing in life is maintenance free. I mean, even a rock erodes over time.
My wife is maintenance free.
Smart man. I can see you've been married for how many years now?
29.
What a smart
29 man. As of Saturday, actually.
Ooh, congratulations.
Yeah, we're pretty excited.
Going back to the family part, and you had mentioned family dynamics, and that was interesting to hear, because not everyone's involved. When you have family gatherings, it becomes not a topic, let's say, because, not everyone's a part of it. As far as family members, and it sounds like you have clearly defined roles, is that pretty much how you handle family disputes? When I say family disputes, let's say your business opinion is X, and let's say Pete, just because I know him, his is Y. How do you navigate some of those things as your family, but you're also treating it in a business setting? Is that more challenging, or is it actually kind of go by the wayside because you respect each other's opinions like you do anyone else in the workplace, and you sit down you have a board of directors, or walk me through, because a lot of people I've had on the podcast are either husband and wife. I've had, smaller teams that maybe have a sister, but nobody that we've had on so far has had a family as large as yours all also work together. And just kind of curious, I'm sure people out there listening have family in business and would be interested in some of that insight.
Well, and I think this extends beyond just the family.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when you're talking about a dynamic organization with committed, hardworking people, whenever a decision needs to be made, I think fundamentally you have to ask yourself one question, which is, whose decision is it with whose input? Now, a lot of times my managers will have a decision to make. Am I going to make the decision for them? No, that's their area of responsibility. Might they seek my input? Sure. And I think the same thing applies with my brothers and me, my cousin. We do have an outside board of directors for more heavy issues. We're 5 and 3. So we have 3, my 2 brothers and myself are on the board, and then we have 5 outside directors, not affiliated with the company, don't have any ownership in the business, that lend perspective, provide a fiduciary basis for us because of the ESOP, and because we have outside minority shareholders. But that's kind of how you get through all that stuff. And, obviously I'm always going to defer. My brother Peter is the CEO of Scherer Brothers Lumber Company. He is my boss.
Mm-hmm.
And occasionally we'll have conversations and I'll have to ask, okay, are we talking as brothers here? Or are we talking as...
Out of curiosity, what's the birth order? Who's older?
Peter's 5 years older than I.
Okay. Yeah.
And then my brother Chris is in the middle. He's 3 years older.
Okay.
So.
Yeah.
And we have sisters who are not in the business, but and plenty of cousins, and they're all keenly interested in the success of the business,
mm-hmm.
and they trust us to do our jobs, and we do so with honor,
mm-hmm.
and with a vigilant eye on maintaining our integrity, our reputation, our brand,
mm-hmm.
as it were, because that means something, especially in the Twin Cities. I mean, it's a big town, but it's a really small town,
yeah.
and so that name is very important to
mm-hmm.
us, and one slip up and you can do a lot of damage very quickly. So back to the whole decision-making process. Yeah, I mean, believe it or not, probably on the same page 85% of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And even when we're not completely on the same page, we still fundamentally have the same end result in mind. It's basically how you get there. And that's why it goes back to whose decision is it with mm-hmm. whose input. And like marriage, and so many things within leadership can be compared to our daily lives.
100%
right?
agree.
Yeah, it's compromise.
Mm-hmm.
Boy, I tell you what hill do you want to die on?
Right.
How
None
firmly,
of them?
how firmly are you going to plant that flag
yeah.
in the ground to
yep.
say, absolutely, no, I'm not going to budge from this position? I can't think of a time, even in the most trying times. You go back to mm-hmm. 2007, 8, 9, when we were strictly a non-for-profit business.
Right.
Even then, I would say we were probably closer, just because we were going through it together. And it's, hey, we got to make decisions, and you know what? We're going to make some good decisions, and we're going to make some bad decisions. The most important thing we can do is recognize when we made a bad decision, and not hang on to our pride and say, well, that's the call we made, we're going to stick with it. No, we are going to regroup. Was it good decision, bad execution? Or was it bad decision, bad execution?
Yeah.
And go back and just continue to revisit that. And our employees were very engaged.
Reminds me, you just talked about the family, and I think you're right that, you all have, the same last name, for metaphoric, even if someone, let's say one of your sisters was in there as well without her maiden name is not the point. But just like everyone is writing for the brand. I don't know if you grew up reading Louis L'Amour books, but there was one of the books was a very well-known one. It was writing for the brand. And it's just like, you don't have to question, like, your family wants the Scherer Brothers brand to continue and to be successful. So I have to imagine that there's some part of that when you are pulling the sled in a single direction, like, hey, everyone here wants this to go well. And, we all know we're not perfect. We all make mistakes. And mm-hmm. I like what you just said. Like, can we shuttle our ego to the side or our pride to the side and say, well, you said it really well. Just, was this a good decision or a bad decision? And what was the outcome of it? And let's move on.
Yeah, it starts with some basic philosophies too, which is, it gets a little cliche when I start going down this path, but when you own a business or you're part owner of a business and you're running a business, if you feel an inherent need to take credit for things, you probably shouldn't be there.
Interesting.
You need to give credit to the people that are doing it right. And frankly, you need to accept full responsibility when it doesn't go right. And if you largely view, if again, people are back to whose decision is it, right? If you confine your decision making to that which is within your immediate realm of responsibility, there's nothing that any employee can do that's really going to jeopardize your business. Now, further to the left you go in the organization, Peter could make big decisions. Yeah, that could cause problems, or myself or Chris or whomever. Mm-hmm. But you allow people to make decisions. And if for whatever reason it doesn't work out, well, first of all, you just invested in their education. Mm-hmm. But also, now here's your opportunity to regroup and say, okay, what do we learn? What do we do differently next time? And you build a more dynamic organization. If you've got a culture predicated on fear.
Oh, man, that's bad.
I don't want to screw up. I don't want to make a decision because I don't want to screw up. Well, then nobody's ever going to make a decision. Mm-hmm. And sometimes, the best decision you can make is any decision just to keep things moving.
I agree. I mean, I got wise advice, and it was one time that there's no difference between decision A and decision B. It's what you do after the fact that makes it a good decision. I've used that a number of times in business, or frankly life, in trying to make a decision, because sometimes there's not a clear outcome. And that is, we often say, like, you go into a home, or let's say there's a warranty call, and we almost we wish it would fail in a dramatic way so we could find the problem. Yeah. Sometimes you'll come into a home 7-8 years later, and we don't know what the issue is, and it's like, so you open something up, well, that wasn't it, and you just wish it was clear. And
it's like going to the doctor. Hey, yes. I don't feel good, tell me what's wrong. I don't know.
Right.
No, you just, hey, no, you've got this, and this is how we're going to fix it. Yeah, I get that.
Yeah, I had a cousin who was a surgeon. He used to always just say ice and elevate. I'm like, that's all you got? You're a surgeon? He's like, I don't know the answer.
Must have been an orthopede.
Nope. He was. He's done a number of fellowships, so who knows what he's at this point. So hernia surgery, actually, down in Cleveland Clinic. So
nice place.
It is. So anyway,
second only to Mayo.
That's what I told him. He actually tried to get in at Mayo, but the technology that they're developing, so the Da Vinci robotics is what they do a lot of hysterectomies and a lot of other robotic surgeries with. And I don't know if it's the Da Vinci method that they use, but he does sports hernias and hernias in general. And I guess Cleveland Clinic is basically on the forefront of that in the world. And so he was very keen on doing that. So.
About the only thing Cleveland's got going for them. We just lost our Ohio membership, or listenership here.
Oh, really? Well, we're pretty local here. Let's talk a little bit about, the last, we talked about the difficulties of 2009, let's call it 7, 8, 9, 10, like everyone in building, and really, frankly, the United States, some way, somehow we're affected, no different than COVID. I'd be interested to hear your parallels between the recession that we had, in that era to, I won't call it a recession, but just like the dynamic of the COVID, just how it's changed business, and if you've learned anything from it. And I'll maybe go first here on this, just that you had mentioned earlier about when you make a mistake, can you learn from it? And I'm a small company. Someone had once told me that in 8, 9, and 10 that because we lost money like anyone did during that time, and we were lucky to survive and very fortunate that we frankly didn't have enough to lose. And so, we didn't have land positions or any of that stuff that took a lot of people under. And I remember getting this advice saying that you got a master's education in business in half the time and quadruple the cost. Congratulations on your education. Mm-hmm. And I've used that a lot because that was a very difficult time, but man, did I learn a lot of really painful life lessons. And so anyway, with that in mind, I'm just kind of curious with that question. Do you find that there's parallels between what we've navigated through COVID and where we're at today with that recession, or do you feel like they're just so different that they're not worth comparing?
The parallels are going to be more, I guess, on approach and perspective.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
If that's fair. Mm-hmm. We learned as a collective within the organization back in the 2000s that anybody that tries to predict anything is wasting their time. Put 5 economists in the room and none of them are going to agree on anything. And so really our philosophy adapted to more of a concept of we're going to be prepared for anything. Be prepared for a big spike up, be prepared for a big spike down, know what your key triggers are, know what your leading indicators are, much more than your lagging indicators. Looking backwards doesn't help you make decisions for the future. And so with that mindset, with that approach that came out of the 2007 recession, I think when COVID hit, our perspective was far more healthy because it's like, okay, this could be really bad.
Mm-hmm.
Conversely, this might be really good.
Right.
So to that end, and I think I may have shared this with you, Brother Peter and I got on the phone, called our top 100 customers. I think we talked to 98 of them. And all but 2 said, our phones are ringing off the hook. Nobody's canceling orders. People are requesting, how quickly can they get into a new house? How quickly can you remodel what I have? Because this pandemic could last for 10, 15 years, and I'm tired of staring at the same wall, and I've always wanted to do this, and yada, yada, yada. And so after doing that incredibly unscientific data research survey, we determined that, hey, you know what? We're going to invest in our employees. They were concerned, little things, you get them the cards, that said, hey, you're an essential worker, the way that our government set things up, you had to have those.
Yep.
We negotiated our union contracts. We opened them up. We gave them more money. We tried to do some other things with bonuses and the like to keep them engaged and to let them know genuinely that we care. We want to see you be, I forgot to turn my phone off, sorry. That we care and that they're important to us and that we're in this together. And so with that, having that proximity to the customer, which is unique for us compared to a national supplier, let's say.
Yep.
We were able to make the best business decisions we could for this point in time in this market, not based on anticipatory predictions, but on what we know, what we're being told. And to that end, I think we fared pretty well through.
I love your comparison of the two, that basically the first recession taught you to have the mindset that when we got to, the COVID era, if you will, that you had a different take on it. I think that's true. I remember a number of times thinking like, there was about 1 month where everyone took a deep inhale, right? I remember we had a house on the Parade of Homes. It was the dream home. It was the spring of 2020. And, I think it was 4 weeks long. After 2 weeks, they canceled it because that was, things were shutting down. And, a couple weeks later, we're essential workers. We kept going on. And then it led to a 2-3 year just incredible boom, that we as a small company had a hard time navigating that tidal wave of interest because so many people were at home. I mean, the office, for instance, just like the dining room before, the dining room has been gone from a lot of architecture for a while. Now, on really large homes, you got to fill it with something, so that'll still be there. But it seems like for a lot of the homes that we're building between the 3,000 and 5,000 square feet, the formal dining room, I should say, is not really highly requested. Once you get beyond that, just a matter of having it in there probably. And now I just lost my train of thought, so we'll have to edit this one. Where was I going with that?
Talking about adjusting.
Oh, thank you. So adjusting. So the office, for a long time, the office was gone from, the office was very big in that square footage of homes between 3,000 and 5,000 square feet. But I saw probably for about a decade, the office was kind of like, we'd rather have a media room, or we'd have a gaming room for the kids, or, a sunroom or whatever.
Now you're putting in two.
Yes. And now
or
there's
3.
Yeah, it's crazy. So now to build a house without an office is just insane because, of course, of all, the Zoom conferences and, all the, working in the hybrid models. And so anyway, it's just very interesting how the market, of course, shapes housing. And anyway, that was just some lessons learned. And
we're always evolving. Although that whole notion of cocooning came out 15 years ago, and I
don't remember that.
You're not familiar with cocooning?
No, I've never heard that term.
Cocooning is rather than living a lavish lifestyle outside the house, it's really investing and putting your priorities inside the home. That's where your family is. It's a safe haven for you. Developing the creature comforts that, theoretically you could do a staycation anytime you want and you've got everything you need. Now, that was never in anticipation of a worldwide pandemic.
Right.
But certainly a notion that, and you saw it in a lot of houses that are being developed. I mean, I built a house in 2003 with a sport court. I might have been one of the first, sport courts around.
That was pretty early on, yeah.
And I did under the garage, did all the rest. But now you see it. It is it's a mainstay
Mm-hmm.
at certain price point
Yes.
homes, and people want to have that additional recreational space. They don't want to go join a club. They want to play basketball year round. It's Minnesota with their kids, or teach them a slap shot or do different things like that. So you have that. You have the office. You have more gourmet kitchens. You have more comfortable rooms and spas and steam showers and all these other things that maybe one would travel to a resort to get. Well, you can get it at home now.
Right.
And I think you'll continue to see that, because there's always going to be this COVID hangover and fear, frankly, of, hey, what's next? What's coming up again? And again, your home is safe. Mm-hmm. It's a place where people can't tell you what you can and can't do either.
Well, I thought you were married for 29 years.
Well, outside people tell you what you can and cannot do.
Hopefully my wife doesn't listen to this one. Sorry, honey. My question was, around that, I think a lot of it is lifestyle, right? Mm-hmm. So I think the community that you're in, and we build a very high-end product. I often tell my clients, don't feel bad. I can't afford my work either. And I say that kind of tongue in cheek, like, we build beautiful homes. Sometimes, I go home to my own home and I'm like, you've been building this $4 or $5 million home or design. You're like, well, of course I should have this, and I don't feel the need for that. But it's just kind of interesting when my job, my skill set is designing a home that's far above my own personal means. It's kind of interesting how you look at some things differently. And I don't really have a judgment on it, other than now that I have kids, I view a sport court far differently than I did when I was single, right? Because if I was single, I wouldn't want a sport court in my house, because I would want to go to the gym to play with 10 other people. Now I can appreciate, as someone who has 3 children, I'm like, man, I can really see the wisdom of having the kids and their friends over to the home. I can see what they're doing. I can play with them. It's a place in, obviously Minnesota, we have, 6 months of, weather that's not as nice as other parts of the country. And, you can embrace it and go outside and do your winter sports. Or you
can move to Florida.
No, thank you. Although the taxes are pretty nice down there, I hear. Well, we've gone all over the place. I had a question for you. One thing that you told me a number of years ago, I don't remember if you remember this. I'm guessing you do, pretty sharp guy in what you say. You had told me one of your primary goals was to always have material for somebody. And I've explained that to clients before. I get a lot of pressure from clients saying, hey, we're looking at the market, the lumber prices are way up, or futures are way up, or, right now numbers are coming down. Oh, so my lumber bid's going to come way down. And you help me with this, and just saying, like, we cost average, meaning Scherer Brothers and Mark D. Williams Customs Homes, we're a partnership in this. And the number one goal is, like, if I call you, yes, we're going to have material so you can build your home. Is that still, where did that come from, where you say, like, that's our number one priority?
Well, that's a little tongue in cheek between brothers, and brother Christopher is our CFO, but he also oversees all purchasing. And frankly, having a family member purchase for you is a huge advantage, because again, there's no fear of making a big mistake there, and you work with it. But I've always been, again, tongue in cheek with them about, just don't ever make me call a customer and say I'm out of 2x4s. I never want to be in that position.
Right. And
there's different ways to look at the market. It's funny, because the lumber bill for a house makes up about 15-20% of the cost of the house. I think
that's fair. Yeah.
Not including windows, millwork.
Correct. Yep.
And I'd throw trusses in with that.
Yes, agreed.
And so of that lumber bill, how much of it is actually commodity goods? And that's your dimensional. Your sheet stock gets treated like, or your panels, get treated like they're commodities, but really not. They're a manufactured product. They play supply and demand on it a little bit, but so that's going to go up and down. And we saw just a ridiculous rise in the midst of COVID, probably about 8 months into COVID, where demand was so much higher. And when COVID hit, a lot of states, the mills had to shut down because they were not essential. Up in Canada, different things. People scaled back production because they feared that nothing was going to be going on, and the last thing you want is a ton of inventory sitting on finished wood goods. And so all of a sudden, there's this huge demand, and so prices shot way up. So there was an impact on the home, but it was never as much as what people thought it was. Mm-hmm. And so even now, you're going to see it bump along, and I guess I got some visual so I can do this.
Yeah.
So when you're talking about amplitude of a wave, you can have really big, tight peaks and valleys, ridges and troughs, whatever we used to call that, right? Yeah. or you can kind of level it off and just kind of smooth things over. So we've always been slow to raise prices, slow to lower prices, because we're doing it off of cost average. And one of the greatest disservices for people out there is looking at the futures. What does that mean?
I know.
It's like, okay, hey, the price per barrel on oil is this. What does that mean?
Right.
Because that is one specific, it's oil. You still got the refinery costs. You got the transportation costs. You got all the things. People talk about lumber prices, and what they don't understand is, transportation costs on lumber, whether it's via rail or on truck, has tripled.
True. Wow, I did not know that stuff. That's amazing.
And it's a small part of the cost, but it's still there, and it adds up. And nobody is in this for free, obviously. But so our deal is to try to take the volatility out of the lumber market as best we can. And so that's where, when you're bidding houses, here's where your numbers are right now. Once we're in the project, you can't come back and say, well, look at the futures market. Well, the futures market is in the future. There's no past market. Mm-hmm. It's all future. Mm-hmm. So that can be 2-3 months down the road. You have to bring that product in. You have to process it. You have to turn around, and you've got other product on the ground. So you blend it out like many commodity-based businesses will do, and then you sell it, and you sell it at a reasonable markup to make everything work.
I have a question that and maybe people listening, if they're buying lumbers in large packages, they would know this, maybe not. So when let's say we price out a $2 million house, let's just say the lumber package is $200,000 for an easy number, so 10%. We will, and it'll say it right on the bid. It'll say it'll say this is an estimate, or this is a bid, implying that it can change. And I have an analogy that I'm curious to see if you think lines up with this. I've always wondered why. I mean, I get it because I talked to my sales rep, and Tim says, well, it can go up and down because obviously as the market fluctuates, as we're delivering this product, that can change. What I don't understand is, if I ask my plumber for a bid, he gives me a bid for, let's say, $50,000, and his bid is locked in. When I get done with the home, obviously if I picked out a different light or a different fixture or the client's picked out something, it won't change. Is it a little, but maybe he's factoring in volatility? Is this very similar to fixed bid versus cost plus, like from a GC standpoint? So for instance, when I build a house for a client, I'm saying I can give you a fixed bid. It's $2 million, and if anything that I make under that $2 million, I can keep, but that price won't deviate if you don't change. Versus most of the stuff in the high end market, we're doing cost plus. Hey, here's our percentage. If you anything you change, is that a good analogy?
It's a perfect analogy.
Okay,
it really is, because in any situation, the more volatility you want to take out of something, the more you pay for it.
Right.
Yep,
that makes sense.
If you want to eliminate risk in your life, you're going to eliminate risk in my life too. And so, there's a little bit of playing the game back and forth. But again, the numbers aren't that significant, absent change. You add a whole new wing onto the home or something like that.
Yep.
Then obviously there's a play. And some people want that. Some people just want to say, okay, this is my price. This is what I'm going to do. Well, and it ends up costing you more. But some people value that. They value that continuity, and it's tough to do on a 30,000 foot house. It's going to take 4 years to build.
100%
I can't do that.
Right.
But for your standard house, that takes what your typical house takes 9 months to a year.
Yeah, for me personally. But I mean, the Nationals probably do one in 6 to 8 months.
Yeah, we don't. And no disrespect, I don't. The Nationals are not part of our niche.
Yeah, and I was going to speak to that. And I did not know that, actually. Obviously I know who I am, and I'm your client, and you help us build these beautiful homes that we do and support us in a number of different ways. I had not known that. So what is your niche? I mean, there's other lumber yards, within Minneapolis, St. Paul, but I'm not going to speak for you. What is Scherer Brothers' niche?
We really focus on. Try to figure out the right way to say this. I'd say more of the local custom home builder remodeler. That's really who we cater to, and we have some local custom higher volume builders.
Sure.
That we work with, and they're good long-standing customers, and we have fabulous relationships with them. We've moved away from focusing our efforts and energies on the national builders. Again, they serve a valuable purpose, and they add a lot to our community not only from a number of homes, but they build nice neighborhoods and have price points that are good for different demographics. I guess I want to do business where I can have a relationship.
I agree.
At the end of the day, that's so critically important. I need a reason to get out of bed, Mark. I do.
Yeah.
And my life just and my brothers agree with me on this too. We're lockstep. My cousin too. There's more to life. There is. And if and when this ever becomes purely transactional, probably the day that I get to retire. I'm almost 55. I mean,
he looks like he's 45.
Sooner or later, I'm going to go.
Yeah.
But I'm enjoying. I love what I do. I love my team. I love my customers. I love a lot of my vendors. Sometimes I'm not very happy with them, but I still love them.
Right.
Back to how my wife feels about me.
Yeah.
And it's just, we're building something. I mean, literally and metaphorically.
Yes.
So we're building homes, but we're also building community. We are building culture, and we're supporting a massive economy. If you look at the residual impact that home building has on the economy, it's crazy.
I mean, obviously you hear about it all the time in terms of, the American dream, especially in our age and above us. The American dream was to own a home, and it still is. I mean, I think it's interesting that messaging, the GDP that's tied up in building is incredible. You would probably know these stats more than I do, but I know, from your Home Depots to your hardware stores to the lumber yards there's so much that goes into a home, the products, everything that's affected by it. It's massive. It's interesting. You travel other parts of the world, and obviously the homes are not nearly as big. They
don't have the land.
That's true. And I'm thinking, I guess, mostly of Europe, and it's much smaller. And they think about things differently. Some things are better, but and some things aren't. And so it's just interesting what people prioritize.
But a lot of times that's cultural differentials too.
I agree.
In Italy they have what they call la bella fiore. So it's really an image, the beautiful flower. So people that have very meager financial means, okay, type of car they drive doesn't matter, their house doesn't matter, but they're wearing the nicest clothes you've ever seen. They're out in public. They're 100% right. They're dressed to the nines, and that personal image for them is everything. Other people other cultures care less about that. It's about the family. It's about the food. It's about this. It's about that, and each their own. And,
you're right.
And America being the melting pot that it is. How many times have you ever heard somebody say, "Hey, when I grow up, I want to rent a house"?
Yeah, no, but
I want to find a great house to rent someday. And but look there's a value to the rental market, and right now with the economy the way it is and all the rest, I think you'll probably see more rental homes coming on board, or rental properties coming on board, because people are going to be able to cough up 20% down.
Well, it's a hot topic. It's a hot topic here in Minnesota. I mean, we have a fairly high cost of living across the country. And it's interesting because I think I'd heard a stat maybe 6 months ago that we're 60,000 units short, meaning we're 60,000 homes or rental, just places for people to live. And people have often asked me, do I see a recession coming? And I'm not an economist, right? Because we're all going to be wrong. But I just simply say this, I know there's a great need. And I know that my phones are very busy, and we're bidding a lot of remodels. And we kind of do... I'd like to be about 70-30, but you never get to pick what rate you're at, meaning new homes to remodels. And
you can aspire.
Yeah, and you're right. You set a goal, and it is what it is, but it changes. And if it's a good client, we are trying to model the business in a way that, everyone says we want to work with good clients. Well, that's true. I mean, that's kind of an obvious statement, but you don't always get to pick. And sometimes and building is stressful. Let's be honest. Someone told me the other day that outside of your marriage, building a home is the thing that people aspire the most in their dreams and aspirations and what they want. So first get married and you're thinking about your, especially your missus, your wife is thinking about, the wedding day, how it's going to be, who's inviting. But a similar amount of effort goes into building a home. Someone comes in to build their dream home, which is different to every person. They have all these ideas of aspirations of what they want it to be. So it's stressful. I mean, you ask anyone during the wedding process, that time leading up to the wedding is very stressful. I should bring on a wedding planner, actually. It'd be very interesting to see if being a project manager and a wedding planner would be somewhat synonymous. I bet it would.
Use the other microphone. You can have dueling occupations. It actually, there's so much emotion in whether it's the aforementioned wedding or building a home. I mean, I don't know if there's any more personal decision you can make aside from choosing a partner,
right?
Than building a home. You're going to live there, and look at I'm truly blessed, and I've moved pretty much every 7 years with my wife. We've built built 3, and remodeled 1. My current home, it brings me joy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I know that's just such an overused term, whoever the person is, about ditching stuff. Does it bring you joy?
Sure.
My home is my fortress of solitude.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I love everything about it.
Mm-hmm.
It's comfortable. It's us. And we spent years
right
planning it. And when you're downsizing, you got to put a lot of effort into planning your home. It's not easy to do.
Right.
And we've downsized twice now. But the kids are all gone.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't need a lot, but what we have is just ridiculously reflective on our lifestyles, our persona, who we are and what we like.
I have an interesting question to ask you. So I am technically, I'm a client of yours, meaning that I'm a reoccurring client, right? And we're partners as well, right? So like I buy lumber from you to build my homes. And so our relationship is something that, generational, right? My dad bought from Scherer Brothers, as do I, and we build these homes together. I was commenting the other day that as far as an industry goes, like the average person, you've built a few homes, but the average person, will build a home for somebody. You spend a lot of time. People always ask, like, how long is your sales process? It could be as short as a couple months. I'm working with a couple that I met the other day. I met them 8 years ago, and we're finally going to do, a remodel for them, which is fine.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. Mm-hmm. And that sales process is, like I said, is extremely long. It's unlikely that I will do another project for that couple. And I'm young in my career. I've been doing it for 18 years. And so I guess I'm in the middle age of my career, potentially. And so, let's say you build for 40 years. Maybe the couples that you built for, the first 10 years of your career, maybe they downsize, maybe they do something, but what 10%, 20% you'll get again. I'm just interesting as a business model. We spend so much time and effort, creating a relationship with this client. You build a house now. My homes take, a year, 2 years, 3 years if you count design in some of these larger homes. And it's, like you said, it's very emotional. You've with this couple for so long, and then it's like kind of like over. It's almost like a breakup in some ways. I mean, we do a lot of things to continue this continuity of, just doing different events or stopping by, and you have a general care for some of these people, and likewise they care about you, and they get to see your kids. I guess I'm just interested in you know a lot of builders. I'm just one of many builders that you have a relationship with. Mm-hmm. Have you ever thought of like, wow, as an industry, it's interesting. They're doing all one-off sales versus like you essentially are B2B. You're selling business to business, where I'm business to customer, but it's not residual.
Makes me happy. Well, you tailor your business to how you derive your revenue, right? So if anybody was to meet any of my salespeople, and these people are fabulous at what they do, and they're great at building relationships. A majority of them are not, stereotypical salespeople, cold calling, doing this and that, because they're relationship based. That's the nature of who we are. Those are the types of people we hire. In fact, you had touched on, different groups that you belong to, and I spend a fair amount of time with lumber dealers from around the country and people that are kind of parallel to the lumber side of supply side of things. And
would that be is that similar to like a Builder 20 group, like your peers and outside of your
yeah, like-minded independent lumber dealers, similarly situated, different markets, non-competitive.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, it's very much like a Builder 20, and some of them would be a round table where there's kind of an open kimono component where you're a little bit more vulnerable and exposed, and you're sharing, pretty detailed information. And others are just more theoretical on the rest. But it's really interesting talking to dealers around the country how they view sales, the type of business they have, and the type of salespeople they need to further their business interests versus how we do it. And there's no right or wrong.
Right.
We just have Twin Cities has a ridiculously professional and stable building community that's very diverse. Between nationals and high-end guys that build one house every 2 years. You know,
Curiosity, when did the Nationals come to Minnesota? Because I don't remember them, in the 80s and 90s. Was it late 90s? When did the Nationals come to Minnesota?
Oh, the Marv Anderson homes sold out to Pulte. I think that was back in the late 80s, early 90s.
Okay,
so don't quote me on it. Yeah. But, they were here. Pulte was here. U.S. Homes bought out Orrin Thompson, then merged with Lennar, who bought out Lundgren Brothers. Yeah. The history is not great on me, but it's usually most of the national builders, came in and acquired somebody of some prominence in town that had significant land holdings, that had reputation, that had teams and systems in place, and they've done very well with it. Some came and some left pretty quick too.
Right. Yeah.
Same thing happened with national suppliers, by the way, too. 84 Lumber was here for a cup of coffee.
I remember that. They're here for a cup of. You're right. I totally forgot about 84 Lumber. Yeah. That doesn't seem, by the way, you could come in and be a builder. I still always say, people ask me, oh, we love your stuff. Can you build us a house in Montana? And I'd be like, I'm sorry. At the end of the day, I could design a house for you with my, architecture contacts here, and we could go out and site visit, but I'm only as good as my people around me, right? And so, while I don't have a large, employed staff, we use the same people on every project. That's how I'm able to look clients in the eyes and say, you like the home that you're in? We can do exactly the same product, because I'm not, we're not a low-cost provider, just like our partners. We are not, we're a good value. And I think this is where I often, in my initial conversations with the client, is trying to understand your value statement. Like, what do you value? And maybe our values align and maybe they don't. And that's okay if they don't. I might not be for you, and that's okay. I think as I've gotten older and more mature and just more established in the business, understanding what your story is and understanding who you are, it's funny because when you come across that confident and that people are like, yes, sign me up for that. I'm like, man, I wish I knew that 18 years ago.
Well, okay. So I get to ask you a question.
All right.
I'm taking over your podcast.
Please
do. You think of
hey,
that?
Both Mark, Curious Builder brought to you by Mark Scherer.
There we go. So I have contended for a long time that as a homeowner, as a homeowner building a house, the finished product of the house you build, not the designed product, because there's different ways to quote it and different allowances and different things, and you make changes along the way, yada, yada. But the finished product, when you're done building that house, I'd say there's usually at most, the way that ends up, there's going to be a point or two difference between pretty much any builder in town on what that house costs.
Yes. If you're assuming the same strata, you mean? Same materials, same talent, all those things.
The finished house. You have to leap forward to the way it ends.
Okay, gotcha.
If you went back and did
forget process, forget all that. Just say this house A, house B, they're exact same materials, same everything, put together the same way.
Absolutely 100% apples for apples, except for a different builder built it.
Yes.
And people, sometimes they charge a little less profit, but a little bit more overhead, or a little bit less overhead, a little bit more profit. But, it kind of all comes out in the wash, is my basic philosophy. So what I tell people, I went to St. John's. I know lots of people that build houses. Johnny's like to do that. But is you're going into a 2-year process with somebody, and you're going to be spending a lot of time with them.
Yep.
Make sure you're aligned and that you feel comfortable with their personality, their persona, their values, all the rest, because that's what's going to matter. That's what makes or breaks the process. You're not going to save 10% building with this person over this person once you have the finished product.
Yep.
It's just not there. There's not that much volatility, especially when you're talking about commodity goods and Marvin windows. I say Marvin windows because that's what we like to sell, and Anderson windows as well. The price for my Marvin windows versus somebody else's Marvin windows, that doesn't change.
Right.
Yeah, it's am I marking it up X% or X plus 1%? Yeah, there's going to be just little nebulous variations along the way, but it all comes out in the wash.
I say the same thing to our clients. So if the question is do I agree with you? Yes. And I think if you are I mean, you said it exactly the same house, but I just say same strata. Like if you have the same talent level and, let's say your builders, you're building against, said competition and they're interviewing me and they're interviewing them. And let's say they have the designs. Usually we try, of course, the more time I have with the client, it's the relationship, because I'm like you. I'm interested in the relationship. One of the reasons why we've stayed small is to have a relationship. And it's a challenge when we've gotten an influx of work. I found that I probably need to spend more time working on the business, and I actually enjoy it. But I sort of also like to be in the weeds a little bit, and I like to I think this is pretty typical of a lot of owners is, to step back, let my team do their thing. And that's not an easy thing to do, especially with type A personalities, I'm told. And, you want to have control of your product. And it doesn't mean you can't, give input, and of course, clients want that. Like,
but your homeowners still want to engage with you.
They do. And so how do you balance that? And, I'm heavy on the front end with sales and design, and that's not like you just want to drop them off and leave them away. It used to be a huge competitive advantage for me if I went up against another competitor that, they had a much bigger project management staff and all this other stuff. I'd say, guess what? I'm going to be with you at every single meeting the whole way through. People love that. They love that message. I mean, I used to just slay with that message because I also backed it up. I did it. I can't honestly say that anymore. Like, I care what the home looks like. Like, I'm not going to go pick out knobs with you. Like, that's interior designer's job. And they do it up way better than I do, let's be honest. So I think understanding who your clientele is, and our clients have led us to the strata that we're at today. I've always just wanted to build good homes. Like if someone wants to build a really cool sauna, like I'm in. In fact, it's funny. I use that as an example because I just got a call. People know I like saunas and, exercise and all these other things. And one of my reps said, hey, my neighbor wants to build like a ridiculously cool sauna. And he knows you build these beautiful homes. Would you do that? I'm like, I'm in. Like, I don't even need to know anything more about it. If he's willing to pay for cool design, like I'm not going to be the cheapest sauna builder. Like if we're going to make this cool, like it's going to be amazing. If he wants to do that, I'm in. And so I guess I like to do cool projects, and sometimes probably too much. I'm an optimist. I think that's what makes me good at remodeling. I can walk into a home and, I'm like, yes, I can make this amazing. It also makes me a really bad spec home builder because I am not good at, I can value engineer. That's not really... I am way better at selling the dream, selling the optimism, because I'm just so excited about their home.
Taking somebody's vision and making it a reality rather than trying to impart what you think the community's vision might be of what
much
they
more
like.
eloquent than I was stumbling through.
I've been there before. So being a sauna guy, you would know that. Why do you only use clear AYE cedar when you're building a sauna?
If you have knots, they'll absorb the heat and you'll sit down and you're going to burn your butt.
You sit on a knot once, you'll never do it again.
I've actually never done it before. I was told that, and it's funny because we're actually building a sauna for a Finnish NHL hockey player, which is just kind of cool. And he told me he went over to Finland to visit his family, and he said it's kind of part of the Finnish culture that you'll have like a antler horn or like and I just built one in my backyard. And I was like, I said, when you go over there, can you get me like, a caribou horn or something like that? He forgot. So now I'm like I'm not a super big hunter. So it's like,
I can help you out with
I need some horns. I need some horns to put on my, my sauna. So anyway,
I have a pair to loan to you.
Oh, a loaner. Okay.
Well, it's like an unlimited loan to the Guggenheim, except for it'll be your backyard, but just can never give them away. They come back to me.
That's funny. Well, we're getting close to the end of our time. I obviously could talk
so soon.
I know we could talk for hours. Frankly,
okay.
My question for the listeners are, obviously I know where you are, but people that don't know you, where can they find you? What are your guys' handles? And we'll have all this in the show notes as well. But if people want to reach out to you and Scherer Brothers, where should they go to look?
Me personally, I really don't do social media because I try to avoid all that. No, we have retail locations in Hopkins, Arden Hills, and Shakopee. About 95% of what we do is for professional builders, remodelers, and commercial folks. But we do work with the professional do-it-yourselfer, I guess is the way to put it. So because of our focus on millwork, and we stock all the exotics. I mean, and we do very little on the low end. We have some MDF. You got to have it around, but come to our stores. We can take care of you on that. But for the most part, really, we leverage our stores to be convenient for our customers, specifically in the selection process.
Your showroom in Hopkins is where I usually send my clients. It's close to my, realm of where I build a lot of my homes, but it's a beautiful showroom. So if you haven't been out to, it's on 169 and Hopkins Crossroad?
Oh, no, Hopkins is, I think it's 11th Street and Excelsior Boulevard.
Well,
It's right across the street from Wendy's and just north of where the new light rail's going through.
You would know where your building is better than I would. I just know how to get there.
Mark, I'm a little bit like Chevy Chase and Caddyshack.
I know a guy.
I'm not quite sure where they are.
One last thing, it's always fun to have a kind of a curveball question for you. If you were to, a lot of people listening to this either own businesses or are interested in it. If you could give some business advice, either an example of some place that either you failed and you've learned it, we talked a little bit about that, or if you were just going to start a business today, what is some advice you'd give to somebody listening what has been a key success for you to be a part of a business ownership group that you feel like has been extremely valuable and that, someone could apply it to their own life?
Couple things. Family first. Mm-hmm. Always. You can get caught up in business pretty quick. And regardless of what you do, you're still living at 24/7, 365. But just make sure you can turn it off when you need to turn it off, and don't lose sight of, and I've got hindsight on my behalf. My wife stuck with me for 29 years and all intents and purposes doesn't look like she's going anywhere. Kids are out of the house.
No.
I don't have a lot of regrets on missing anything.
Yeah.
So for me, that balance equation, which is very, very important to my organization, to my family, to me, and frankly for our employees is huge. The other thing is, don't take yourself so seriously. And I slapped on a jacket today just because I put on a jacket, and of course I walk around the office and people are like, "Hey, do you have a funeral today?" I'm sorry.
For those who aren't watching us on our YouTube channel, Mark's wearing a very snazzy plaid sports jacket.
I like sport coats, but I never have cause to wear them because we used to be far more serious pre-recession. Mm-hmm. And we just said, we got to lighten up a little bit. Mm-hmm. Let's have some fun doing this. Nothing is ever the end of the world. Mm-hmm. You know what? Work hard, be better, and trust other people. That's one of the most difficult things for any entrepreneurial, spirited individual is to let go. Yeah. In fact, that's ends up being the demise of some really great ideas, is that entrepreneurs hang on too tight and their strength was the idea. Mm-hmm. It's not the maintenance. Yep. So bring good people on, trust them, compensate them, give them the vision, and turn them loose. Mm-hmm. That's how your businesses thrive. It ain't gonna fall. It ain't gonna go through you. Yeah. You see your limitations now as you've grown and all 100%. The rest. You got to do it different. Yeah. You got to do it different, but you got to enjoy life a little bit while you're doing it.
Agreed. Thanks for coming on. Appreciate
thanks for having me. Can we do it again?
I agree. See you in an hour. All right.
Thanks for having me.